Okay, if you're ready for the next presentation, next in line is my colleague from Infigo, who internally have many nicknames, but mostly we use Gandalf, not because of his looks, but because he magically creates 1, 2, or 15 tunnels in engagement, so we can exfiltrate data and stuff like that. He'll talk about the art of password cracking with topic name password123 exclamation mark. That is probably the password we all use. And if his laptop works, he will start the presentation. So, Neven?
Oh, no. Sorry, he died. Someone hacked me. I do apologize.
So in the meantime, if anyone has some bad joke, now it's time.
Hello. Just one question. How did you know my password to set it as the name of this presentation?
As I'll show you, while the laptop boots up, I can try to improvise and ask all of you that have a password that adheres to the certain rules. I'll just say to lift up your arm. So it's one word. First letter is a capital 1. It's followed by few numbers, most probably 1 to 3, and it ends with a special character, most probably exclamation mark. Thank you. I can see by your faces. No one ever lifts their arm, of course.
So that will be it. Neven, thank you.
Come on. It's starting up. No problem. It worked. Yes, but it's dead now. I'll fix it. Da nisam tamo.
Yeah, so the lesson is you should not crack the password at the time that you should do a presentation.
I hate this shit. Okay. And restore pages.
So the troubleshooting is not intended, but you should. Okay, something's happening. Okay, remove the history.
There we go. He just needed some time. I need presenter view.
Okay, you ready?
Here, and full screen we go. Good day, everyone. Thank you for attending in such large numbers. I gathered you here to talk about some passwords. For the beginning, who am I and why should you trust me? You should not trust me. You should not trust anyone, most definitely. But it seems I do have some experience in cracking passwords. I started since the second half of the 90s. and learned a bit about those. What do? I come from a company called Infigo. I break other people's computers there. They call it pen testing and red teaming, and it seems I'm having fun and getting paid to do it. So why do we talk about passwords in 2025? Because during our engagements, we noticed that many people, including administrators, still use really bad passwords. So I'd like to finish this topic once and for all. What are good passwords? And show you I like to teach people to defend by showing them how do we attack them. So I'm basically going to show you the ways I've found out throughout the years that are the best to guess your passwords. So whatever I show you, you just avoid those principles and your password will be good. Okay? This whole lecture wasn't a lecture in the original. It was internal workshop at our company where we had a competition with prizes who's gonna crack most password hashes. So since we do not have time for that today, I'm just gonna show you the theory, and afterwards you can practice that by cracking passwords on your own. I'm gonna show you the whole commands and examples. If you need my slides, to be easier to copy paste the commands, contact me after the lecture or on my email address. We'll figure something out. Come on. So how did the whole mess start? Some 20 years ago, the US people figured out, hey, we should have some guidelines how to construct good passwords. So they asked, according to the internet, they asked the guy Bill Burr, which is not a comedian by the same name. It seems everyone knows about the comedian. I do not. I know about this guy. They asked him, hey, could you write us a few short tips? What are good passwords? Like quickly, just TLDR version. And he wrote something we've all heard many times before, and that's there should be 8 characters, uppercase, lowercase numbers, and at least one special character. Okay? Does anyone here think that's good enough for passwords? Okay, that's really not good enough. That's old advice. So how the whole mess started? The guys from NIST, that's the American National Institute for Standards and Technology, and they're the guys who give advice to the various government agencies in the US and the industry. And they wrote his recommendations as an official guidelines. And many US government agencies and industries and colleges started adhering to those rules. And then the rest of the US said, hey, if it's good enough for them, it's good enough, it's also good enough for us, and started copying it. Then the rest of the world said, hey, if the whole US does passwords in that way, that must be good, let's do it. So it became like widely known knowledge or a rumor that that's the good way to make passwords. So that was some 20 years ago. Good password with 8 characters.
Snow White and 8 dwarfs. A special character.
Okay. So that was 20 years ago. Some 10-ish, 15-ish years ago, a great guy called Randall that has a strip web comic called XKCD. It's great. You can Google this up just by writing XKCD password and it will pop up. So he made a comic explaining what's the good password. I can talk about this slide for half an hour. You probably do not want that. So who amongst you did not yet see this comic? Wow. That's way more than I thought. Okay, we're going to spend a bit of time on this comic, but we cannot afford half an hour. So I'm going to try to do, well, the basic principle is how many different PIN numbers for an ATM machine are possible? 10,000, right? Okay, so that's the complete number of combinations that's possible for ATM PIN. Okay, so we can calculate similar numbers of combinations for passwords. So if you take a look at the screen here, you can see that the typical password has one word, as I told you. First letter is usually a capital one, but not always. It has some numbers and special characters, and we can count bits of, let's say, combinations, randomness. So if you do a bit of math, I'm skipping up 5 minutes of math here, you can figure out there's something like 28 bits of entropy, which should be 2 to the 28th. And if you can try and guess 1,000 passwords per second, which is pretty reasonable even for a live web application, let alone password hashing, okay? You'd exhaust all of the space. You'd try out all the combinations in about 3 days. Well, that's pretty horrible. And we're talking about attacking live login form and web application, okay? That's bad, that's really bad. How about if we chose a password which has 4 words out of a set of only 2,000 or 4,000 words that I give to you. So I give you a set of 2,000 to 4,000 words. I say, I'll construct a password out of the set I just gave you by using 4 words, okay? Who thinks that's a good password? Only a few hands. Let's do some math. So the number of combinations using only few thousand words that I explained to you before, that I gave you before. I gave you the whole list. The number of combinations is, skip 5 minutes of math, we've got 44 bits of entropy, which if we try to guess by 1,000 guesses per second, it would take us about 550 years compared to the 3 days. So that's the ratio, how stronger this password is, okay? Now try to imagine, I envisioned a short list of only a few thousand words. Now imagine Croatian language. We have all those weird things we add to our words or change. Skipping a lot of math again, let's say we're using at least 60,000 words each one of us knows with all the permutations of each word, okay? That would be 60,000 to the 4th. You can try and make your calculator suffer by calculating 60,000 to the 4th, and you'll figure out it's way larger number than this one is, okay? So just by choosing Croatian language, we can construct way better password, okay? And we're not even using capital letters, numbers, or special characters, okay? These passwords, especially if there's some semi-nonsensical sentence, are really easy to remember and type in, as opposed to this one, okay? So that's basically the way to go, okay? I promised you I'll talk more about the current days. So we're getting to the 2025. Some 5-ish years ago, 10-ish almost, Bill Burr gave an interview for the Wall Street Journal. And he frankly admitted that his original advice was not quite good, and apologized and said, people, hey, please do not use it. So how do we make it happen? So if we just say some weird hairy guy on stage told us to make our passwords different, that does not sound too convincing. But his advice was accepted by the American Institute, which said, okay, we'll give out a new version. Well, we'll write new rules. And this is old news. This is 5 to 10 years old news. And they specifically wrote that companies should not force their users to use capital letters, small letters, numbers, special characters, and such. It's written. You can show it to any auditor that's official NIST guidelines that's in power today for many years. Okay? They also, it's publicly available. You can download it and read it. I'll give you a few hints what's in there. They also said that you should check suggested passwords when user tries to change a password with the blacklist of common known passwords. So users do not choose password123 exclamation mark, for example. They also said that the password length matters. It's similar to what we saw on the slide before, a few slides before. They recommended at least 8 characters. I'd say I'd bump it up to at least 12 to 15 characters. The way to go is to use passphrases, the capital letters, and all the other nonsense. It improves your password, but way less than just adding a word or two. Okay? Also, they said do not force your users to change their passwords unless they're compromised. This is a really interesting one. I do not agree with this one. I'd say forcing users to change their passwords is a good thing, but not really often. Let's say once a year is enough, if you ask me. Okay? That's my opinion. All of us have opinions and other. So that's also official. What else is really good for passwords? If you use slang, for example, in Croatia, we have many parts of the country where people do not understand people from another parts of the country. So any one of those words is great addition to passwords. Also mistypes. Non-Latin characters, which we call Croatian letters, are especially great. I'll not go into technical details, but they're really notoriously hard to crack because of technical limitations which do apply today. They might not apply tomorrow, but today that's the state of the cracking tools. What can you also do? You can also make a new account in your company, which has a really simple password, like password123 exclamation mark. So if anyone tries to spray the same password over all users, it will hit your honeypot account, and you can set up an alarm. It's really cheap and simple. Whoa. Password reuse is bad. Password managers are good. Initial passwords are really important. So when someone joins your company and gets their initial password, there's a large probability that they'll use a similar principle to construct their future passwords. When we crack passwords of the whole company, we can see each company has their own patterns, and they usually correlate to the initial password most often. Okay? So when giving your users initial password, make it a good one. Make it 4 or 5 words. Having long passphrases is really great, but the bad thing is users are really inventive and they can figure out to make a really long password like 30 characters of number 1. 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1. Okay, they satisfy the 30 character requirement, but it's a really bad password. That's why you need to periodically crack them or ask us to crack it. I really like cracking, so give me your passwords, I'll crack them almost for free. Don't tell my boss. So how are passwords stored? We've got a password, let's say password123. You should never on your server store a password in the original form. We call that original form the plain text. Okay? So you should store it in some garbled way. Now there are some encryptions and hashing algorithms, and we try to teach our younger students in company the difference, and they sometimes have problems with that. So today we're going to talk about hashing algorithms. So hashing is some one-way mathematical function that's supposed to turn readable password into some seemingly garbled state like this. And in theory, it should be impossible to convert this form back into the password. So, okay, what's the point of whole deal? We take readable password, we convert it to something unusable. Well, the idea is when the user comes the next time and says, hey, this is my password is password123. It goes through the same mathematical function, and if the hashes match, then that's the same password that was initially used to calculate that hash. Does anyone need this repeated or something? You're all good. Thank you. So you store hashes. When you choose an algorithm which will be used to construct the hash, you ask Google or a professional which algorithm should we use today. There's a big difference which one you choose. Choose the good ones. There are good ones. Okay. So how do I crack password? Well, basically, I figure out a way to steal your hashes. There are many ways I can steal your hashes. Now I got a bunch of your hashes, and I know which hash corresponds to which username. But I do not know the plain text yet. What I do is I try a whole bunch of plain texts and see if it matches any of your hashes. That's called password cracking. Okay? So password cracking does a lot of calculations. What machine is really good to perform those calculations? Well, the math is really similar as Bitcoin mining. Really, really similar. So what would you use to mine Bitcoins is probably way to crack passwords. In other words, you use your GPU, not CPU. Okay? So what do? I use my GPU, and I tell my GPU to try out a whole bunch of different passwords to see if they match hashes. How much? Well, this single laptop I'm trying to use for the presentation is capable of cracking, let's say, 30 billion passwords, 30 billion passwords per second. One laptop. Miliarda is billion, right? Right. 30 billion. Okay? 30 giga hashes. Mega giga hashes. One laptop. This is not a cracking rig. This is not a data center. I do have an advantage. Okay? I can try out a whole lot of passwords. So what could I do? Well, first I need a tool to crack your passwords. I said I want to teach you really quickly in basically a few minutes. We've got how to crack passwords. So there are two most used tools. First of which is Hashcat, which I prefer to use lately. The other great tool was John the Ripper. The author of the tool, Solar Designer, actually held a lecture last year at this conference, if I'm not mistaken. We'll talk about Hashcat. It's a bit easier for beginners to get into, at least I think so. To use Hashcat, you could spend years, like I did, figuring out which options are best, or just copy my examples and hints. That's the next 4 slides. So switch on the optimize flag, tell it what hash type is being cracked, or do not, since newer versions have some kind of auto detection that certain kids like to use. You tell it which tech mode it will use. That's the -A and number. We'll talk about those a bit later on. The most used ones are 3, 6, and 7. We'll get to them a bit later on. Cheat sheet number 2, -I increment. It tries longer and longer passwords in accordance to the rules you previously gave it. You'll know when you need it. Just remember it's there. You can use a show to show cracked passwords, username to show corresponding usernames. std out to file is all the permutations Hashcat does. It just outputs to file, which can you again put into hashcat with more permutations to get even more password candidates. That's the basic principles. What we got, session and restore. That's really great, especially if you want to run a few cracking procedures in parallel, which you should do 2 to 3 max. So session name, restore, session name, and that works. Custom character sets is great. Why? Because if you say and special character, it's going to try out many special characters, some of which some of you probably do not even know where to find on the keyboard. Really seldom used ones. It tries all the special characters, okay? You can specify your own characters. You can use masks. U is uppercase, L is lowercase, and some custom character types. You can tell it to do a benchmark to compare two machines, which one will crack certain hashing algorithm faster. We do lack oxygen here, I think. How it all began. We got long time ago, we had password lists. So we go on the evil internet, while World Wide Web was still in its infancy. You go for our FTP sites, you grab some password lists, and you try that list of passwords as password candidates to crack hashes. That's how we did it a long time ago. But what if the password is not in the password list? We're going to get to that soon. But what password list should we use today? Well, the biggest, most popular one is called ROQ. Use Google. Google is your friend, or other search engine. How big is it? Well, it's about 100 to 150 gigabytes of TXT, plain text file with passwords. I hope at least some of you can imagine how huge that is. Okay, that's really a lot of passwords. Okay, that's good first step today. A document to use that is here. So what if the password is not in the password list? Well, you can use something called word list. What's word list? Well, it's basically something like a dictionary, but preferably without all the special characters like 1 to 3 exclamation mark and stuff. But those are just bare words. Okay, so you can use word list to add certain rules. So you got a bunch of words, preferably customized in the language of the target. It really helps. People do tend to set their passwords in their native language. And you got some rules. And what are rules? Rules add something to the base words from the word list. And they can change case, especially a popular rule is to change the case of the first letter to be capital one. It can substitute some characters, like putting a number 3 instead of a letter E, or putting 1 instead of letter I. It can insert and delete characters, and it can add certain suffixes, something to the end of the word, like 2025, exclamation mark. Okay? Those are rules. So should we write those rules? Well, it would be ideal, but it's time consuming. So hashcat comes with something called best64. It's a 1 kilobyte file with rules. Size is comparable to the time it takes to try out all the rules. So this one is really small and quick one, only 1 kilobyte, called best64 because someone envisioned those are the most common rules to maximize your chances of success. With hashcat, you also get dive. It's 800 kilobytes old, but still useful. And something that does not, with hashcat also, ROQ1 comes, and you can use it with hashcat by using a command such as this. As far as rules go, one other you should download from the internet, at least one. That's one rule to rule them all. In fact, the newer version that's called one rule to rule them still. That's a really good optimized rule set, which you can apply both to word lists and password lists. This is almost cheating how effective this can be. Okay? Kaonashi is another popular rule set, 3 specialized sets. Some of them is for word lists or passwords, but don't be afraid to use them interchangeably. Results could make you happy. You can also make your own rules, but we do not have time to go into much depth about it. What I'd like to show you is that Hashcat Wiki has a rather nice documentation of what do all those characters mean. It's a text file, you can edit with your favorite text editor, and that's about it. One other thing I'd like to figure out, existing rule sets are often out of date. So at least do open up your text editor and make them a bit more up to date, like adding current year. Okay? Mask text, that's something like targeted brute force. You basically have certain character classes like lowercase letters, uppercase letters, digits and such. And you tell Hashcat that it's supposed to guess a password in accordance to some mask. Let's see this mask, for example. This would mean uppercase letters, these much lowercase letters, digit, and special characters. I think it's 8 of them all together. This one is really popular because in companies which say at least 8 characters and all those other rules, it's usually in this format. Okay? What can we also do? We can observe the methodology of how to crack passwords. Well, basically, I can do many guesses per second, but not infinite, and I always want more, and I do not have infinite time. So I want to optimize my approach to maximize my chances to guess your passwords. So it's a race against time. Basically, run at, let's say 2, maximum 3 parallel cracking processes per GPU, okay? And you want your results to scroll. You want revealed passwords to fly all over your screen. And whenever one of your tactics gets slowish and passwords start just dripping and not wildly scrolling, you pause it, take another approach, and see if it can scroll way faster. When that approach gets slower, for example, first one could be you're using the password list. The second one could be you're using a word list with a certain rule set. Third one could be you're using a mask tag. The whole idea is you get more ideas when your current method gets slowish. You take another approach, and the parser starts flying. And when they get a bit slower, you pause that one and figure another one. That's the basic principle. There are many finesses, like are the passwords using salts, and which algorithm is it? Why? Because in certain algorithms, it's almost the same effort for me to crack 1 password hash or 1,000 password hashes. It's just a small overhead for each new password hash, really small overhead. And for some types of hashes, it basically is proportional to the number of hashes. So 1,000 hashes is 1,000 times slower, okay? That's a good hint for you. You want to choose an algorithm and use those salting ideas to make my life harder. More things you can do is you can use certain tools to make your life even more easier if you want to crack hashes. One of them is Mentalist. Mentalist is a graphical interface for creating word lists and password lists and such. You can tell it you want some base word out of some text file with certain suffixes according to certain rules. Clicky, clicky, clicky. Then you run out of disk space, and you say, "Oh, okay, maybe a bit less." Until you finally get your file saved, then you use it to crack passwords. Okay. Then you've got one rule to rule them still. Oh, PEC is really great one. So it can do some statistics. So when you crack certain amount of passwords, you already have the idea what kind of passwords that company uses. So you can use automated tools to do some statistics for you. And this one can say that 23% of the cracked passwords are of length 8, for example. And it can also say that 88% of those passwords are lower alphanumeric, so lowercase letters and numbers. Okay? This set obviously does not have a strong password policy properly enforced. By the way, the password policy you think you have in your company, in practice, often does not reflect the passwords that the users in your company uses. Try to crack your hashes. You'll see many passwords do not adhere to the official password policy. See it in practice. Do not trust me. You can also see what's the distribution of digits or special characters. And it can also give you certain masks, which can, in accordance to the already cracked passwords, it can automatically write you masks by trying to predict how long would it take for a computer to run through all the combinations of the mask in comparison to the percentage of the passwords that mask would crack. And it sorts them by basically the success rate. You get your mask file, give it to Hashcat, and crack a lot more passwords. Okay? Then you've got even bigger sample to analyze and figure out your next steps. What can it also do? So it can, you can tell it to generate masks for, let's say, 10 minutes of cracking time. And it says, okay, I generated 779 masks. If we presume your GPU is this powerful, it would crack 56% of the passwords from the sample. Or you can say it has a bit more time, and when you give it more time, it can crack more passwords. Or you can say, okay, do not calculate how much time would each mask take. Just sort them by the most success rate, never mind how fast it goes. But the Kraken is brilliant. Kraken is really brilliant. It's another tool that you give it your cracked passwords, which you already did crack, but you want to crack more. So it analyzes them by a lexical analysis and creates something called smart lists. Those would be words or parts of the words or common suffixes. And it can also use a dictionary. So for example, for the password123, it would say, okay, I see 3 parts here. I see a word from the dictionary, that's password. I see a suffix, 1 to 3, and another one that's exclamation mark. So it would create a smart list with 3 entries. And that's the way it would analyze each password. And then you can apply that to an old word list. You crack way more passwords. It's really powerful. Or you can combine each entry from the smart list with each entry from the same smart list. You get for each base word, each observed suffix or prefix. That's really, really powerful. That can crack a lot more passwords. Because if your colleague uses some word that you think no one would guess that, and another colleague uses some suffix, and you use the combination, I crack those 2 passwords. I can crack the password that was constructed based on the same ideas. Okay, we got some statistics. Basically, if we observe a smart list with 5 million entries, would crack from the big rock you leaked password list really a huge amount of passwords just by using plain entries from the 5 million smart list. It's really, really powerful. More cheat sheets for you, since we do not have a whole day to make this workshop really happen. This is the cheat list. How should you use Kraken? Create a smart list. About 50K is okayish. Do not forget to generate words with year suffixes, because people do tend to enter years. More recent years are more common. Let's say last 2 to 3, and then last 20-ish to 60-ish. You can also use Kraken to generate all the combinations in accordance to a certain principle, and even pipe it directly into Hashcat to use it with all the other modes. This is how it looks to use Kraken. This is how common smart lists look out of a large password set. Kraken can also estimate entropy and say, okay, if I create a smart list out of this password list, we can crack this much passwords by just combining each entry from the smart list with each entry from the smart list. Or if we append to each entry in the smart list number 1 and then 4 digits, we can crack almost half of that number of passwords, which means people who made these passwords really like to append numbers to their passwords. Kraken, and we have Hashcat way. So we're running out of time, so I'm going to jump to conclusions. What we learned today: complexity, all the rules for passwords, upper, lowercase, it's overrated. It's old-fashioned. It's really, do not use that if you can avoid it. Length is what really matters for passwords, and guidelines are an official document that many people consider to be really smart and something you could adhere to. It's something you can show to your management or whoever you want to persuade, like an official document. I showed you briefly how I crack passwords. Try to figure out something that will make my life harder. Observe that I never showed you I combine 3 or 4 words, at least not that easily. Even less 5 words. It's really complicated for me. If you use just 5 words, I quit. Okay? If you use a well-known phrase, okay, I might guess it. But if you use 5 words that are not a well-known phrase, you win. Okay? Uppercase letters, numbers, special characters do help, but are really not necessary. And try to, if you have permission from your company, try to log in as each user in your company with something like password123 exclamation mark. In my experience, in most mid to large companies in Croatia, at least one account falls for that. You'd really be surprised. So we got 2 minutes for questions.
So yeah, maybe before questions, someone want to share their password with us so Neven can tell if it's good or not?
No problem. There's a piece of paper in the back. You just write down your passwords. I'll evaluate them and post it on the B-Sides website.
With the name, please. So, is there any questions for Neven?
So thank you for the presentation. It was nice. Probably the question you hate the most: what was the longest password that you cracked? What algorithm was it, or did you had any that you failed to crack?
Yes, basically, really often in first few hours we too often crack like 70% of passwords of the whole company. It's really terrible with one laptop in field. The longest one was definitely one from some password list, which is nonsensically a long thing that someone used for some obscure reason again. Okay? Basically, if it's not a well-known, really long password, it's not crackable. Forget about it. Did I miss question part? No? Good. More questions?
Je li popularni Dinamo ili Hajduk?
Dinamo. Dinamo. I use Dinamo and few inappropriate words to quickly evaluate the quality of the password list. If there's no dynamo or few bad words, it's a bad password list.
So yeah, that was the only correct answer. So, any more questions?
So just out of curiosity, which departments tend to have better passwords and which tend to have worse passwords in companies?
I've seen horrible administrator passwords in large quantities. I'm really appalled in these days that privileged accounts can have such horrible passwords. Like one of the worst examples out of this whole lecture for administrator accounts. Those are the ones I remember most. I did not do a comparison by departments. Usually I do not go that deep into analysis which username belongs where.
So, the answer is not the HR. So, oh,
What kind of laptop do you have that you don't mind?
This is Legion something, Lenovo Legion something. It's powerful machine. It's not mid-range, it's high-range machine, but it's one laptop.
But do you always use that device for tracking passwords, or do you use custom hardware?
This is my default device. A device I can put in my backpack. If the workload requires more machines, we have other ways, including distributed cracking, which could be a lecture of its own.
connected to the neighbor.
We do not do cloud cracking. It's expect in really special cases because we do not want to give our customers caches to some unknown guy in the cloud. Sorry.
So, if there is no more questions, thank you, Neven, and that's it.
Thank you.
And sorry for the lack of oxygens. We cannot do better.